Hey, welcome back. Business 150, Introduction to Management. This is now video number 3 in our exploration of the topic of teams in organizations. And you can tell from this title slide, today's video is about team development and norms. What kinds of norms do teams establish and thrive on? And how do teams develop from very inception, when folks maybe perhaps don't really know each other, to where they are working together like a well-oiled machine? Well, we're going to look at that today, and we hope that after this video you will be able to specify the 5 stages of team development. Well, how do we start this out? Well, teams are organic, living organizations within themselves, right? They have life cycles, just like people, just like bigger organizations. A smaller team of a finite number of people has a natural life cycle and development. And although we see in the academic research several different models of group development, emphasizing all sorts of different types and behaviors, even orientations, one useful model or depiction of the life cycle of a team is given here below you. 5 stages, as we mentioned, right? And we call that forming, storming, norming, performing. I didn't come up with these names. They just happen to rhyme. And finally, 5, adjourning. Okay, and so let's really look at this. And of course, this is one of the things that as a manager, you should be well aware of, how teams really live and grow and foster communication with each other. What normally happens when you first put a team together? Well, this illustration copied from your textbook, right? Table 13.3. What we're really talking about is the first stage of a team, right? We call it forming. When group members, they've been put together on a team together, either formally or informally, right? They are now together in a team. Group members meet for the first time, start to become acquainted and become familiar with the group's tasks. And of course, we're talking about everything from a production team to a book club to a bowling team. This is what happens when group members who are only vaguely, if at all, familiar with one another find themselves on the same team and beginning to learn, what is this team about? What are we trying to accomplish? Who are these people that I will now be collaborating with? That's the forming stage. The second stage then, after folks begin to get familiar with each other, you see here the idea of storming, stage 2. And this is table notes. This is the stage where some level of conflict occurs. And we're not talking about, of course, violent fisticuffs. We're just talking about a little bit of rubbing each other, perhaps a little bit of friction, as team members try to assert their roles. Some will jockey for leadership positions. Some will make known their feelings and thoughts about the tasks. And of course, this depends a lot on personality, how bold some folks are just by nature, how vocal some folks are. Some folks are naturally shy and reserved. Some are more than happy to speak their mind to strangers. And so you understand what this particular second stage can look like. Folks who believe themselves to be natural leaders, of course, whether anyone agrees with them or not, sometimes jockey for the leadership of that group or team, right? And so there's a little bit of, trying to figure out where you fit on this thing, right? Everyone trying to still be polite and yet still trying to assert what they would like to see in terms of the team and their role on the team. This eventually gets to the third stage, what we call norming. And you can see there in the middle there, the stage where conflicts, they're pretty much resolved and harmony ensues. And so hopefully in a well-run team, you realize there is a healthy element to that second stage of storming. But once all that stuff gets shaken out, you hope that you are able to resolve those little bits of tensions and friction and really ensue and put in store some real harmony and collaboration with each other. And that's where you get to the fourth stage of performing, where team members have reached a level of maturity with each other and with the group and the way that the group runs, and that facilitates real performance, real task development, real accomplishment of team goals. And finally, at some point, the team will oftentimes have a formal end. The group formally disbands. Perhaps the project has now been completed and handed off to customer service, or however, depending on the type of the group, however the group formally adjourns, and typically you will have a post-mortem at that point to see how you learn from these kinds of things. Now, let me just tell you, perhaps from your own experience, you recognize as you think back to a team that you have been on in the past, perhaps a team in college, or a team that you're on right now at your job, wherever you work. And you may recognize, as we go back to this slide, that these really are natural stages in human social development when you are put on a team. It is very, very, very common for all teams to go through, in some way, shape, or form, these 5 stages. You know what it feels like when you first meet folks on your team, and maybe, it's a team of 5 or 6 people, maybe 2 of the folks know each other casually, so they have a little more in common up front, but generally speaking, everyone is kind of unfamiliar with each other, and there's this very politeness and getting to know each other and figuring out what you all do, right? But that very quickly gets to the storming stage where people will very much try to assert, right, what they want to do, where they see their role. And of course, where it gets uncomfortable at times, this storming stage, is where, for instance, someone believes that they're the best leader, or they're the best coder, or the best programmer, or the most creative person, and what happens when other folks on the team don't necessarily agree with that perspective? It's an uncomfortable thing, but it is necessary. For instance, when someone decides, I want to try and be the leader of this group, but no one else in the group wants that person to be the leader of the group, right? That can be a little awkward, but that's necessary for real group consensus on what everyone's role is going to become. And once those things are resolved, of course, right, that's where norming and eventually performing gets to, if you are able to get folks really content, acquiescent, and satisfied with the roles that they now presume on this team, right? Now, I would tell you about this 5th stage. It's often overlooked, adjourning, but really the purpose of adjourning is to have the post-mortem. What is a post-mortem? A post-mortem is everyone on the team getting together for a last meeting to really reflect on what went well, what could have gone better, what would you have done different had you only known, right? And the key to a great post-mortem is a post-mortem without personal blame, to reflect upon the events that happened without pointing fingers at each other. That's a delicate art, but for mature people, you should be able to pull that off and keep folks on task. Why do you have a post-mortem? Because as I've continued to say in this class, people don't learn from experience. They learn from what? From reflecting on experience. And this is where you really learn from the performance of a team when everything is fresh in everyone's mind, but you're able to reflect on what went well and, quite frankly, what could have gone better, so that you all walk away from that experience learning more to do better the next time, whatever team you're put on in the future, right? Very, very crucial, important point that's sometimes overlooked when we talk about how teams function. All righty, the last topic we touch on in this lecture is the idea of group norms. You can see there, the group norms are defined as appropriate behavior for group members that help reduce the disruption and chaos, quite frankly, that would ensue if group members really didn't know how to act and perform with each other. And you can see their norms tend to be of 3 levels, right? There are those pivotal norms. These are the standards that are critical for group success. There are relevant norms. They're important, but not quite as critical as the pivotal norms. And then there's peripheral norms, those that are accepted by some, but are not, maybe not completely really all that important for organizational success. We have an illustration here, right? So you can see that the group really functions based on the base of pivotal norms. And those might be, for instance, Absolutely, we agree. A norm for our team is we are going to deliver based on formal deadlines. We are not going to miss formal deadlines. In fact, if we have to, we will work all night, all day, weekends in order to deliver by norms. And of course, the entire team has to agree upon that. But if that becomes one of your pivotal norms, that will define what it means for your team to be successful. Now, you can see that there's another type of norm, relevant norms, right? And they are important, but perhaps not as critical for success, not nearly as much as saying we are absolutely going to deliver on deadline, right? Relevant norms might be we are going to treat everyone with absolute respect. We're going to speak to one another in a respectful way. We're going to engage with one another in a adult, respectful way. And you know how that is, right? Sometimes you get one or two folks who, when tempers flare or when they're under stress, they're the first one to stop being polite and they say inappropriate stuff. And right, so you know what I'm talking about, right? It's a relevant norm. It's very important for your success. But you know, when somebody flies off the handle, it doesn't necessarily jeopardize the entire project, right? It's important, but not critical. And then finally, there are peripheral norms, acceptable but not necessary for team success. It might be, you might establish a peripheral norm that says, hey, on our team, every Tuesday we all go out to lunch together. And the key to our lunch together is when we get together for lunch on Tuesdays, we ain't talking about work. We insist we're going to talk to each other on a personal, human level. We are, on Tuesdays at lunch, talk about the work is verboten, prohibited, right? And you may establish that as not necessary at all for team success. It just helps to build healthy interpersonal relationships on the team. So you sort of get the sense that these three levels of norms, right? Some are absolutely crucial to you delivering what you need to deliver, and others maybe not so critical, but will help to improve the team experience. So we hope that that's helpful for you to be able to not only specify the 5 stages of team development, but also begin to think about how you establish cultural norms for your team to perform together. Hope that's helpful. More on teams in the next video, and we'll see you in the next lecture.